Today, I'm going to give you the 6 things you need to think about to get your cannabis business going and to keep it going. So if you're ready to start a budding cannabis business, this week is for you. And there's good stuff in this episode for everyone, even for those who've had a cannabis business for a while. So you're going to want to check it out. Hi folks, Chip Schwager, the Greenleaf CPA, and I help cannabis entrepreneurs build and grow exceptional businesses. Welcome to Ask the Greenleaf CPA. As more and more states legalize the plant, cannabis businesses, even existing ones, are presented with more profit earning potential. Think about it. Since legalization in 2014, Colorado's regulated cannabis industry sales have topped $6 billion. And sales are projected to reach $50 billion by 2026, further proving the potential of a lucrative industry. Given the cannabis industry's short history, though, no one can be fully confident in how the cannabis industry will unravel and how cannabis businesses will fare. Starting a business, any business, requires a decent amount of work, both to prepare and to legally create and operate it. A huge thing to consider is the demand in your area where you're planning to start your cannabis business and how you can set yourself apart from others offering the same service. After all, you won't be the only one wondering how to start a cannabis business when your state opens up. So you're going to want to think about what the industry landscape is like in your state. What are the risks and who is your competition? And if you're new to this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click the bell, so you'll always be the first to get my tips and tricks. So here's the 6 things you need to know before starting a cannabis business and the steps to take if you decide to enter the cannabis industry. So step number 1 is to decide what kind of cannabis business to start. Now, normally the first step for starting up a business would be coming up with a business idea. But if you're ready to start a cannabis business, you've already had that step completed. What you do need to do is decide, though, is what part of the cannabis industry you want to be in. Do you want to open a dispensary? Do you want to grow cannabis? Or do you want to deliver it? Or maybe you want to do it all. Either way you go, the steps to starting a cannabis business can't progress until you've decided on this aspect. Many of the other steps for starting a business will be fairly basic. But remember that with cannabis businesses, the laws from state to state can change dramatically. And you need to be very sure of each of them before you take action. You'll also want to spend a lot of time doing your research so you completely understand the rules around where and how you can sell cannabis. Okay, the second step is write your business plan. When starting a cannabis business, your business plan will need to be a bit more detailed than it would be if you were opening a less strictly regulated business like a restaurant or a jewelry business. First of all, make sure you're following every law in your state, from where you want to open your cannabis business to who your suppliers will be. Make sure everything is in line with the law. I think the most surprising thing about having a cannabis business for new cannabis is the amount of regulation that's involved and how it's constantly changing. It's a lot. Your business plan will likely continue to change as the laws do, but it's key to have it in place when you're first starting a cannabis business. Now, when you do create your first business plan, make sure it includes the following items: business costs and when you plan to turn a profit, how you plan to attract customers, what will set your business apart from others like it, and who are going to be your competitors. You'll also want to touch on where you're going to run your cannabis business from and who your suppliers will be. And lastly, whether you're going to need legal counsel to help keep everything in order and accounting services to keep your books and records and seed to sale tracking, because that's critical in our industry. And check out my episode where we talk about the 10 reasons why investors don't invest in a cannabis business. And guess what one of those are? No business plan. No business plan means no investment. Full stop. It's really that critical. Okay, step number 3 is to register your business name and entity. Since cannabis isn't legal on the federalized level and national prohibitions prevent the interstate sale of cannabis, big businesses have generally stayed away from the cannabis industry thus far, making it a prime industry for local businesses to enter. Your cannabis business will likely be local and on a smaller scale, but you still need to choose a business entity that's right for you. The business entity you choose will affect the taxes you pay and the level of risk you're personally exposed to. Now, you might be leaning towards operating your business as a limited liability company, or what we call an LLC, or maybe even as a corporation. Now, both entities can shield owners from personal liability, but there are some key differences when it comes to an LLC versus a corporation. Now, we talked in a previous episode about the big mistakes you can make in setting up your cannabis business. So check that one for a full list of considerations about the setting up of your cannabis business. You'll also need to choose a name for your cannabis business, and this is the fun part. But the process of choosing a business name will be specific to your state. But generally, you'll need to conduct a search to ensure that the name you want is available, and then there'll be a small fee associated with reserving your name for a set amount of time. Nail down both of these things before you try and register your cannabis business, as you'll need this information to do so. Okay, the number 4 step is to register your cannabis business and obtain licenses or permits. Every state has different laws around starting a cannabis business, and therefore different types of business licenses, permits, and registration practices will be required depending on where you want to open your business. You'll need to do your homework and ideally contact a legal professional in your state that can help you sort through everything to register your cannabis business and get your proper permits. Before starting any cannabis business, know exactly what documentation, licensing, and regulatory bodies you need to comply with to start and operate your business, and especially if you're applying for a social equity license. Some states like California have portals designed specifically for the licensing of cannabis businesses and entire websites designed for business owners looking to start a cannabis business. Keep in mind that simply being a cannabis retail or dispensary owner also comes with different rules and regulations than a business that grows or delivers cannabis. Now, all of these cannabis-specific permits, licenses, and registrations come in addition to registering your business in the state, simply to be cleared to do business there. Don't forget that while you're saddled with more cannabis-specific tasks, you'll also have to do all of the other work when it comes to taxes and registration that a regular business would have to do. The number 5 step is to register to pay taxes. Taxes will also depend on the state in which you're starting your cannabis business. However, no matter where you're starting your cannabis business, you should apply for an EIN, what we call an employee identification number, which is also referred to as a business tax ID number. Now, you can apply for your EIN online directly from the IRS and get approved almost immediately. And you're going to need it when tax season rolls around and when you're paying payroll and income taxes for your business. Your EIN will also be necessary if you decide to open a business bank account or a credit card, or if you're going to try to apply for some sort of funding. Which brings us to item number 6, which is getting funded. Every new entrepreneur has to face the reality of business startup costs. Those starting a cannabis business, though, might have more expenses than a typical business. And if you find that you can't cover all of these initial expenses yourself, you may look for funding to start your cannabis business. This is another reason why you want to create a thorough business plan. Any investor or lender that you go looking for money for will want to see it to know whether your business is well thought out and that you have a plan to turn a profit. As a dispensary, you'll need to have licenses to sell cannabis. In states where cannabis is legal, cannabis businesses typically need to pay around $5,000 for a non-refundable application fee just to start their businesses. Now in Louisiana, it's only $150 to apply, but in New Jersey, it's over $20,000. Most applicants for certificates fail to meet the startup capital requirements needed to ensure smooth operations from the get-go, which is where investment capital comes in even more importantly. It's way harder to have a successful cannabis business than expected. The number of costs, including high rents and taxes and lack of write-offs and licensing costs, are all working against you. The applications and licensing fees paired with any regular equipment or marketing or startup costs that you may face make starting a cannabis business an expensive endeavor. So you may be tempted to take any investment you can. But here's the pro tip. If you're in that situation, I want you to check out our video where we talk about what you should do when a potential investor wants to write you a check, because not all investments are good investments. And one last thing, Once you're in business, taxes are steep. Due to Internal Revenue Code Section 280E, cannabis businesses fork over a ton of money in federal taxes, more than the average small business, because you're taxed on gross profits rather than on net profits. Whereas the federally legal businesses can deduct a variety of different business expenses, which actually help keep those businesses afloat, cannabis businesses can't qualify for the many different tax credits and deductions for operational expenses. And just to set the record straight one more time, IRC 280E cannot be beat, regardless of what some folks may try to tell you. Just don't listen to them, because the IRS is still winning case after case from people who try these tricks. You're in a risky industry as it is. There's absolutely no reason to add more risk by trying to win a losing game against the IRS. About the only way to beat 280E, and it's really not beating it, but mitigating it, is using the law to your advantage. So if you want to legally reduce your tax liability under 280E, drop a note down below and I'll send you the only way that I know how to legally do it. And while we're on money, just one more thing to mention: borrowing money in this industry is tough. Cannabis businesses have a harder time finding small business loans to keep their businesses operating smoothly. The lack of small business financing for cannabis businesses stems from the fact that they're federally illegal businesses. Now, many of the best banks for small business loans operate on a federal scale and are subject to federal banking laws that make lending to a cannabis business nearly impossible. And the big federal banks aren't willing to take the risk of being seen as aiding activities that are considered illegal under federal law. So for the most part, big banks won't lend money to a cannabis business, and that's not going to change until we get safe banking and some sort of marijuana banking reform. Until then, alternative lenders have filled in some of the gaps in lending to owners of cannabis businesses. However, before you deep dive into starting a cannabis business, be aware that your financing and funding options will be limited compared to what more traditional small businesses could secure. So the bottom line here is that the best advice is to pre-plan everything well and be well funded. Considering the many complications and intricacies of the cannabis industry, wannabe cannabis entrepreneurs should think a little bit longer and harder about whether starting a cannabis business is the right move for them. The excitement of a profit earning potential in a relatively new and rapidly growing industry needs to be weighed against the downsides, namely the cost, financing struggles, and regulatory burden. Now, if you do decide to go ahead with your cannabis business, and I hope you do, there are additional steps. But for now, the things we've talked about will help you get your cannabis business up and running and on the way to $1 million business. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like. And if you'd like to see more, hit that subscribe button. And if you do want to learn more about anything I talked about today, you can also check out my website at www.thegreenleafcpa.com. And if there is something that you're stuck on in your cannabis business, go ahead and drop a comment down below. I get back to every one of them personally. Now, we drop new episodes each week, so I hope you'll join us again. Thanks so much.